get started?
Yes, please.
All right, good morning, everybody. We're going to call this meeting of the Broker Responsibility Working Group to order. Welcome. It's nice to see smiling faces in person here at the track building. And just as many online joining us as well. So glad that we're able to facilitate both ways for this meeting. We've got a good agenda today, and so I'm excited. Before we do, we're going to do a little bit of mild housekeeping. I'm going to turn it over to Vanessa for that.
Okay, hello everybody. Just to cover some of our basics, and we have a little bit of a new requirement, which is if you are not a member of the committee, can you please turn your camera off? That way we've got all the members visible. If you are speaking on something like that, you can of course put your camera on, but we just ask that during the regular part of the meeting that you have your cameras off, so we've got all the members and liaisons that we could see. As a reminder, everyone stay muted unless you are speaking. That really helps us with sound issues. There is a raised hand function, which I think you all are familiar with, but for me, it looks like a smiley face with a hand next to it like this. You can push that and it will raise your hand, and I will help monitor that and let Chance know if he doesn't see it. That you have your hand raised. You can also, if you're a member, feel free to speak up at any time. You do need to remember to unraise your hand after you've spoken. This is one I always forget. And finally, when it comes to the chat, please only use that if you are having issues, if you're having technical issues. So you can't hear us, you can't see us, and if something's going wrong, please use the chat function for that. Just in terms of open meetings, we want to keep everything that you have to say that's substantive to the meeting out loud, vocal in the meeting so that folks can hear it. And that is all I have to turn back to you.
Thank you, ma'am. All right, we're going to move to agenda item number 3, which is public comment, including any written public comment received on non-agenda items. I know we have somebody here live with us today that wants to speak, but I'm going to ask him to hold on for just a second because we're actually going to move your agenda item up so that we can take care of you since you drove in. Do we have any other public comment? Anybody on the meeting that wants to say anything?
Folks, I'm sorry. I'm having a real hard time hearing everybody, and it's really jumbled. Jumbled. And I didn't hear the instructions either. Can you all hear me?
We can. Is that better, Bill?
Yes, there's an echo.
Okay, that's a little bit better now. I just heard you pretty good. Okay.
I'm going to speak up real quick. It might actually work better with the mics off.
Oh, okay.
Which is weird.
Is that better, Bill?
Yes, thank you.
See? Learn something new every day. Forget all the tech. Let's just go back to old school. Right? All right, so we did not have any other public comment, did we? Very great. So because Mr. Lee Warren is here with us today, he joined us on via Teams last time, but he drove in today. I want to go ahead and make a quick agenda change, and we're going to move item number 7 up to item number 4. And so Lee, if you want to go ahead and you'll come up to the podium and address the group.
Well, thank you very much. I didn't have to do that. I was anticipating being down here for a while. I know I'm familiar with how the meetings work, so I never want to try to get anybody out of order. But just thank you for putting it on the agenda. So last quarter in regards to this, and so the purpose here is just to try to see if we can get the dialogue started about some possible solutions for what we might be looking at. It's something, you know, I've been licensed as a broker and an inspector for 16 years. I've dealt with property management for quite some time. Right out of the gate, when I first got my salesperson license, the first thing I did was I went to work for a company managing 400 houses, and I was the only licensed person in the office. I got to see very quickly the things you aren't supposed to do, and a lot of the lack of accountability, you know, that was there. And the broker of record was a paper broker. And so I've dealt with that side of it. I've also dealt with it from the investor side as well. So I am an investment property owner, and I had, unfortunately, a licensee, a bad situation happened with a licensee that was there, and that broker also had no responsibility. And unfortunately, myself and a number of other consumers in that particular scenario were lost a lot of revenue and will never get back due to other circumstances. But this is something that happens all the time. I see it a lot. I watch the disciplinary actions, through Trek a lot of times, because sometimes it's just really good entertainment. Sometimes it's a good way to lay the groundwork of things not to do. But seeing over and over the number of property management items that come through there constantly, and it seems very cyclical as the markets go up and down. Right now, Trek has more licensed sponsored or licensed agents and brokers than we've ever had. So over 160,000 as far as just the active agents and brokers. Well, every time that market turns down, those people look for a way to generate income. They can't get the listings or whatnot. They're already having a hard time doing that. So I'm trying to hopefully get one step ahead of what the last time we saw in 2008, when that really started to turn down. See, a lot of people really jump into property management, oftentimes without their broker's knowledge, and getting paid directly by their client, which every salesperson knows that's rule number one when you go through all your courses, and not get paid directly through there. So that's obviously one issue is the payment that's going there, but it really puts consumers at risk because there's a lack of competency in a lot of these areas. And because property management is allowed to be done with a license, but there's no prerequisite for actually any education on that, is where I think the disconnect really is. So previously I proposed 2 possible solutions, certainly up to anything else or other opportunities that may achieve the same goal. I am the chair of the property management committee for Texas Realtors. So we've discussed this, over a number of years as well. Ideally, a lot of property managers say they'd love to see a license. The reality of making that happen is probably just not going to happen. So it's just, I can sit and try to fight the uphill battle that's never going to win, or we can try to find some solution. So, Trek is a consumer advocacy agency, and that's really what we're here for, is to try to protect consumers. And I think this is somewhere that we really have an issue that needs to be addressed in some way, shape, or form. Broker accountability is certainly always on everybody's mind. That's always a really hard thing to do because sometimes we're a very reactionary entity when somebody files a complaint and not a very proactive type of thing. So I'm trying to get a little more on the proactive side here. So the 2 possible options that I had kind of come up with is one, a designation similar to the designated broker scenario where you have to be a designated broker and go through the broker responsibility course in order to sponsor agents. So I think it's a great thing because there were a lot of paper brokers out there that had no idea what they were doing, and the licensure process prior to the current system, you only had to be a broker or agent for 2 years, had no sales transactions whatsoever, and just as long as you have the hours, pass the test, and you're now a broker, and you're responsible for a lot of people and a lot of transactions. Fortunately, I know you guys have been working on modifying that even again to do that. But there's still a lot of those brokerages out there that have been had their license for a long time that aren't falling under these rules and don't do things the way they should. So I thought one possibility is to create, much like the designated supervisor role, designated property manager role for the brokerage side, because if you're going to sponsor an agent who is doing property management, I think you should at least be able to show some competency or some basic knowledge of what property management entails and what those rules are. I was actually speaking to an agent on the way down there this morning, and she runs across a lot of people who do property management. She thought about getting into it, and once she actually got in and started reading the property code, she said, nope, I'm out. I'm done, because there's so many intricate details of property management that it's very, very easy to not know. And I give her credit for at least looking at the property code, because most of them don't. They say, oh, I'm just going to write it down, take my percentage, and call it a day. So having some type of designation for the brokers to do property management, similar to where you can see it on the website when you look up their license number that it actually shows, so that salespersons who want to get sponsored can actually see, oh, yeah, he actually has some basic knowledge there. And then the agent also having to go through that course as well prior to actually doing property management. So if we do it that way, at least it's one step that might get us somewhere. Ideally, I would prefer, I can go either way. I like that one for a number of reasons, but the other possibility, the other suggestion that I had is possibly making it one of the pre-licensure courses for becoming an agent. So I think that would help for people coming through the ranks now, but it's not going to do anything for the existing people that are there, which is kind of my limitation for that. So that's another option, but I think the designated property manager might be a better way to go. And it's the whole goal here is to try and see if we can't open that dialogue and see if we can't possibly go down that path. I'm willing to spend as much time and come down, and that's why I wanted to come down instead of just doing this on Zoom. Is if I'm going to be the one kind of getting this ball rolling and trying to kick this on down the road, I want to show I'm at least willing to come down and make the effort as well. So
awesome. We appreciate it, and I think I speak for every broker in the room that we've all dealt with what you're talking about, so we know.
Yeah.
If you'll hang tight in case we need to bring you back up,
Sure.
we would sure appreciate it for comment. But before we get into that, before we really start a discussion on this topic and what this group wants to do with it, I would like to ask Jennifer and Mike to give us some historic perspective on what we're talking about, because I know that this is not the first time that this has come up. That these discussions have been had for a decade plus, and so. Can you give us a little bit of background, if you don't mind?
Jennifer Wheeler, Director of Education and Exams for the record. I made a couple of notes on this, really just to offer you some context to what has occurred over the last several years. One is just a reminder that we do have a 30-hour pre-licensing, well, it's not a required pre-license. We have a 30-hour property management course available for SAE or continuing education credit now. I want to tell you that in 2017, the Education Standards Advisory Committee initiated work on developing a property management certification, which would have included both coursework and an experience component. One of the discussions that took place revolved around the work that it would take to create something that was at least as substantive as some of the existing property management designations that are out there for voluntary. You get them voluntarily. And then just again, for context, in 2018, the Sunset Review directed the agency to look for ways to minimize barriers to entry. At that time, we also had a pretty significant shift in ESAC membership. And so really the initiative just fell off the radar. So that's just kind of a historical, what we've done so far. Any questions?
How far did that discussion on a designation go?
It went quite far, actually, to the extent that we had drafted rules for a property management certification.
Is there any way we can get some of those that came up?
I have all of that.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, I can definitely provide you with that.
Yeah, we should look at those.
Okay,
If you don't mind, thank you.
not at all. I'm happy to provide that to the committee. Anything else for me?
Well, and Jennifer can also, if you have questions that come up throughout your discussion, she's available as a resource on the education front.
Oh, absolutely.
And Mike on the enforcement front.
All right, Mr. Malloy,
Thank you.
thank you. So we wanted to get some perspective on enforcement and what property management claims look like. Okay. Sorry, apparently I'm being told I need to yell a little bit.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Mike Malloy, Director of Enforcement. If you look at it's 17, page 17 of your materials, we have a report that I do every month called the E3 report. It's basically a analysis of types of cases that we get. And I basically took from 2014 through this fiscal year, which ended August 31st, to reflect the two categories that deal with property management. And overall, there's been a downward trend of, now this isn't like stuff the percentage that we discipline, this is the percentage of the complaints that we receive, we categorize them. They may end up being insufficient evidence or no violation or something like that, but they're categorized at least by the attorneys that end up closing the cases. I will, I've been at the commission since 2009. So basically there was a big uptick, like Lee said, when the housing market went down in 2008. There's been a downward trend of these things, basically because there wasn't short sales out there back in, you all remember where people couldn't sell their house, they needed to lease it or something like that, or forego foreclosure or something like that. Commission was proactive. I mean, when I started here, there wasn't even in the statute where you could, where we could regulate the control of rent, 1 to 4 family houses, single family houses, I think. That wasn't in the statute. They added that to allow us to control, property managers out there more readily. On top of that, we beefed up the trust account rule right about the same time or shortly after. So there has been proactive effort on the enforcement side. And some of these statistics where you see is, I think generally, that industry's improved and it's cleaned up a lot. Unfortunately, there are bad apples. And, Lee had experience with, one of the worst that we've historically almost had here, at least in my tenure here. We had over 45 complaints against Ms. Williams. And so if you see that spike, that 2019 spike, that's basically her.
Basically her?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
Otherwise, it'd probably be just, either level off or downward trend on that day. That saying it's not an issue for education and stuff, I'm not here to speak on that topic. But there has been a downward trend, and it seems there is more competent people out there doing it. And, we do discipline people on those things. And it's people that probably should be doing what they're doing, to be honest. But it's also people that, may not necessarily need to be in the industry altogether. Because they may be doing something else, not even property management, I just say, my personal experience from reviewing these matters over the years.
All right, will you stick around because I have an email from a property manager that I'm going to read and I'm going to want your comment for sure.
Do you want me to stay up here
No,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks for the insight, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I do have a question for you, Mike. Are these numbers, when I'm looking at this blue line, is it part of the orange line or is it separate from?
So the orange line, the lower percentage one, I believe. Okay. So the one is, the blue, that's the misappropriation. So that's the actual stealing.
Commingling.
The other ones are more general property management or leasing issues.
But one is not part of the other, right? So if I'm looking at 2019, for example, we're looking at 15% of complaints had to do with property management, not 11.87.
Yeah, or they could be the same thing. Someone could allege multiple things in a complaint. So we do a maximum of 4 types of allegation, or 4 types of subjects can be in each complaint. So they may have been complaining about the leasing and misappropriation, or maybe just one or the other. So
Double dipping, but the worst case scenario would be, we'd be looking at around 15%.
yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, so in preparation for this, as a follow-up to Lee's comments in the last meeting, I reached out to my favorite property manager, who is Mike Mingdon with Fair Residential in Houston, former president of NARPM, has been in a lot of these discussions, has chaired the committee that Lee now chairs at Texas Realtors, and got some comments. And so I'd like to read those in for the record. In the early 2000s, there was a big group that wanted to make property management a separate license. Took 10 years in the end, only added 3 words to the definition of brokerage activity, which were control of rent. And during that 10 years, there was always come back with, we need more stories, we need more cases for enforcement, for it to make sense. And then when the market downturn happened, we saw those cases tick up, just like you said. And so there's been a lot of cases, there's been claims on the recovery fund, but Mike's big point in his email is that the enforcement isn't happening to the broker, happening to the agent. And we've had, I remember a case recently where the broker admitted that they had no idea what they were doing because they were broker in name only, and nothing happened to that broker, something happened to the agent. And so until his point was that the biggest problem that we face when it comes to property management is lack of enforcement of the broker themselves for the activities of their agents. So I just wanted to put that in as part of the discussion. So if there's anybody else who wants to jump into this discussion, by all means, please do. Okay.
Chance, I think, I'll just say this, I think that competency with the broker and competency with the agent go hand in hand. And if an agent is out there roguely doing property management and the broker doesn't know about it, what is that old saying? They say ignorance is not bliss, really. So truth is that they should be held accountable as well. I think that part of the reason why I think that it's important to know who works at your firm is so you know what kind of people you're hiring and what you've got up there representing you as a brokerage. So there's really no excuse in my personal opinion.
I agree with that. And I do think that if we're going to implement something like a certification, it has to come from the broker first. So they have to be certified if we go that route. And then require their agents practicing to be certified as well, which, I mean, like in my brokerage, our policy clearly states that we cannot do property management. So I guess I don't understand how brokers would allow it or not know that their agents are doing it. I mean, they review the contracts.
Maybe
not, right? I guess that's the problem.
that's the problem.
But yeah, so I agree they do. It has to come from the top.
Right. So I'll tell you a story that Mike Mingman likes to tell is he teaches the Texas Residential Property Management designation for TAR at HAR. And one of the questions he always asks purposely to try to trick people up is raise your hand if you have a trust account. And there are a whole lot of people in each one of those classes that raise their hands that are not brokers. And I would bet you that their trust account is their savings account if I had to guess. But there are people who should not be raising their hand because it's against the law for them to be doing that. And so, in most cases, I think the broker is unaware that this stuff is happening. And I mean, I think you know who the types of brokers are who let that happen. Not to say that anybody is impervious from a rogue agent happening, but I think most people have controls like checking contracts and compliance where they would get wind of that pretty quick and could take action.
Chance, I would like to say one more thing. I think that having what Lee is talking about inside purview of TREC and of the brokerage itself, if you physically, it would have to be the broker physically going in and checking that they are doing property management and saying, hey, this person is my property manager, this person is doing it. Even if that's all we did, it would add an extra layer of, hey, I'm in control, I understand what's going on, this person is doing property management, and you're designating that person to do it. And if they're not competent, then truly that would fall back on the broker as well. I think that's what Lee is looking for. Am I correct, Lee?
So Lee, if I go into my licensed services and I've got a designated supervisor checkbox that if I have a team leader, I'm going to check that box because that person I'm going to require to take broker responsibility, of course, every time they renew their license. And are we looking for something like a checkbox that says this person is a property manager?
Right, something like that, again, an extra layer of accountability. And we've all seen those situations where brokers are, I didn't know they were doing that and whatnot. And unfortunately, we've seen that so much that they're using that as the line of defense.
Right.
And I think therein lies the problem. Because they say, well, if I don't know about it, I can just tell them I don't know about it and I don't get any disciplinary action against me. And I'm not saying that as anything negative towards enforcement in any way, shape or form, but I think it's a loophole that I'd like to see us close, and I think this is one way we can close that. So I think this will, something of this nature, whatever the final format looks like, at least kind of puts the broker on notice, like, okay, if I got 200 agents out there, maybe I need to send them an email once a month going, hey, just make sure these are what our policies produce. We don't do property management, or we don't do this, because if they know that they can actually be held accountable for it, even if someone is doing it without their knowledge, and they have no experience with it, no education to get that designation, to get that checkbox. Again, just raise that level of accountability, which I think in the end really is what is going to protect consumers a little bit more than what we have now.
Lee, I think you've got a valid point, because I think one reason why they added the checkbox for designated supervisor is for that accountability. It's basically achieving the same thing on the property management side. I think it would bring a lot more awareness to making sure that your agents, most especially, would know what they're talking about. Sure, they know what they're talking about before you name check on that checkbox.
I mean, is it going to solve the problem? Probably not.
But it will help.
But I think it will certainly, it gets us one step closer to that area, and I think increases that broker accountability for those types of things. It kind of puts brokers on notice. You need to be a little more accountable for the agents that you sponsor. If you're gonna sponsor them, and you are responsible for them, period. Now, you've taken that broker responsibility to know what that entails. Let's take that one step further, because if they go off on that side, because like Jennifer said, there is an elective course of property management, but it's not required. So even the new agents that come through, they can literally start property management with no education whatsoever.
So Lee, would you think that maybe we could add a piece of this to the broker responsibility course? Or do you think it would be a separate course that, if you're thinking education wise?
I would think if we do it, I think a separate one would be best, simply because the amount of information that's involved in property management, I don't know if you can really slide that into the broker responsibility. Plus, if you do it as a separate course, it's a course that both brokers and agents could take to have to make sure that that information is consistent, both for the agent and for the broker, because the agent doesn't need to take the broker responsibility course. But if we have this one course, now we don't have to create two courses.
Right.
One for agent, one for broker. If you have one course, and you know that both the broker and the agent are taking the same course, everybody's got the same information in theory, and should know at least the basics of how to perform property management services.
Awesome. All right, thank you. I'm going to go, we've got some hands up in the group here. So Mr. Baker, you'd like to make your comment?
Hi, okay, yes, thank you. I think we've got two basic concepts here. One, I absolutely agree on the broker responsibility part. And I think when you look back, I guess it's been 15 years now, that TREC began to understand the importance of educating the brokers on their responsibility. And that's started the broker responsibility course and moving forward. And we've done an incredible job, I think, as a group, patting ourselves on the back, of really helping brokers understand that. We'll never close all the loopholes, work through it, but I think we've got that one issue. We need to continue to make sure brokers understand their responsibility. Having a designation, having that property management designation up there, I think that's a great point in there, can work and can help out and deal with it. The other issue is the property management itself, and this becomes a consumer issue that anyone who's going to do property management needs to know what they're doing. They need to have some expertise. I'm glad that Jennifer is going to send us the information from ESAC. I served on ESAC at that time. I thought I remember soccer was also on that at the time, but I'm not sure on that. And we talked about that. And I think we made some great moves forward to do that, recognizing that we're still dealing with somewhat of an issue with certain elements of the legislature that wants to prevent any obstacles, anything getting in the way from people doing what they want to do. And we've got to balance that with making sure if they're going to do something they want to do, that they know how to do it, that they're responsible. Otherwise, the consumer is harmed. And I think moving in this direction of doing both things, one, helping brokers understand how responsible they are. And in 535.2, we make that point over and over and over again. And that's a section of the rules of track that's expanded dramatically over the last several years. I think we continue to do that. We continue to push it in the broker responsibility course. But I think we need to address the other area, and that's the competency of someone who's going to do property management. I think having that designation thing where it's clicked off like designated supervisor is will be a really good starting point and tell everybody here's someone to do it. One of the things that I think I recall when ESAC was addressing this is maybe not so much a license, but if you're going to advertise in some way, shape, or form that you are doing property management, that you have to have a certain level of education to be able to advertise that, similar to the attorneys who say they're board certified to do family law or real estate or whatever. So I think that really helps us in looking at trying to work on the competency angle as well as the broker responsibility angle. That was just my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you, Bob.
Michelle?
Bob.
Like you have a little.
Thank you, Bob. Yeah. Bill, you had your hand up as well.
I had a couple questions on the percentages that you were talking about on the complaints. Percentages are a little bit hard for me to get my arms around. What kind of actual numbers of complaints are you talking about in these particular areas? I mean, what is 2% and what is 7%? What does that equate to in terms of real numbers of complaints?
Hold just 1 second, Bill.
I could possibly get you that information. The thing is, since you could have multiple allegations and multiple categories in each complaint, it's hard to say. I can give you the actual raw numbers of how many allegations were during those periods, but it won't actually equate apples to actual complaints.
Yeah, where I'm going with it, I'm not trying to hang anybody. I'm not trying to paint you in a corner. What I'm trying to figure out is the real extent of the problem and see how big of an issue this really is. If we're getting 10 complaints, 2% is nothing. If we're getting 1 million complaints, 2% is a lot. And so I'm just trying to get my arms around the extent of the issue. And it sounds like to me that you were saying that in one case, the gal did 45 of the complaints were all one person. So I'm just trying to make sure that we're sort of focusing on deciding about regulation, deciding about education, deciding about imposing requirements on people if there really is a consumer issue, and number two, if there's really a lack of competency and a lack of diligence in our industry with regard to our professionals. So anyway, that was my first question. My second question is there any way to, in Lee's presentation, are you all talking mostly about residential property management as opposed to commercial property management? And to what extent is that a sort of an area that needs to be dissected and separated in terms of either vision, education, representation? Do you have any feel as to if these complaints are mostly coming out of the residential side as opposed to any commercial issues?
Yeah, so I'll go to your first question. I'll just tell you, last year we opened 7,000. Sorry. We opened about 7,500 complaints.
That's overall on everything.
That's overall on everything. About, quote me on this, I think about 1,800 of those 7,500 were brokers and sales agents. So then you could probably, extrapolate from that the percentage amount of complaints that we get. I can do the math and I can probably tell you, but that at least gives you some idea. For your second question, majority of these complaints are residential. I'd say at least 90% of them are residential. We have limited jurisdiction in the commercial world, because the only thing we really have, and anyone can control the rent, because we only have the single family limitation there. And so basically it falls down to a property manager in commercial. If they're not licensed and they're doing leases or procuring clients or something like that, then they'll get in trouble with us. Otherwise, the majority of other stuff falls out of our jurisdiction. So that's why we don't get many commercial complaints. A lot of times if there are issues, the lawyers handle that stuff for the commercial stuff, because it's higher dollar, obviously. So, and it's more complicated, sophisticated types of stuff. Does that answer your questions?
Yeah, it does. Thank you very much. That was terrific.
So Bill, just doing a little back of the napkin there, that's about 670 complaints.
Well, I don't know that that's, again, like you said, these may be multiple sort of mixed up complaints too.
Right, just an overall number.
Yeah, and again, I'm not debating it. I'm just trying to put it in perspective, in the thousands of transactions and the thousands or hundreds of thousands of transactions that we do a year. That's a fairly minimal amount of things, if that's in case. The other thing I was sort of wondering, Lee, if you had some idea of the areas that you feel like we're sort of lax in. Property management is sort of a big area. There's a lot of components to property management. I'm in the property management business on the commercial side significantly, and leasing, funds management, fiduciary responsibility on paying bills, taking care of people, tenant relationships. Those are all sort of things that I think are and I'm asking you, are things that I think are pretty much already identified in other aspects of our licensing and our education responsibilities. Is there some areas of the property management field in particular that you feel like we're maybe dropping the ball in? Is it the regulation law, the law part of it? Is it the facilities management, the repair and maintenance part of the business? In other words, where are we sort of needing to corral these rogue agents or rogue property managers? And I'm saying it in tongue in cheek. I mean, which is the area that we really need to sort of hone into to see if we can improve some of our folks that are in this business?
So to answer the second question you had that you addressed to Mike, I agree with Mike completely. It's 90% probably all residential 1 to 4 family type of things. Once you get 5 or more units, it becomes a more commercial situation. The rules change a little bit for people, leasing agent that work for apartment complex, and it falls under different guidelines. So the majority of what we're really talking about here is residential property management, 1 to 4 units. I think to answer your latter question, the biggest issue that I see, and like I said, I've been watching the disciplinary actions for years because I like watching this kind of spike through. And although I think the 2019 numbers are a bit of an anomaly because of the case we talked about before, and we talked about, you look at where it started on his graph on 14, how high that was, and yes, it's gone down, but we haven't had those situations. But when we're talking about that trend, we're just about to, I think, turn that corner here soon as the markets start shifting, and short sales, whatnot. I mean, right now, if somebody's getting underneath, they don't have to rent the property out because they know they can sell it in 3 days with multiple offers with $20,000 over list price. So the need for property management has gone down dramatically. So right now, it may not look like the need is there, but if you go back in history and even just look at the 14, which is 5 years after that, 5, 6 years after that recession, those percentages were pretty high. But I think the biggest issue, to answer your latter question, is usually funds. It's owners' funds, the consumers' funds, the renters' funds as well, not just the property owners, but the renters as well. Security deposits are a huge issue with security deposits being taken or being utilized for reasons that are unlawful and not allowed to be done. Property managers, salespeople working as property managers, taking that security deposit, not putting it in a trust account, and then all of a sudden that tenant moves out, and that security deposit is nowhere to be found. Well, that's not the owner's money, and it's not the property manager's money, it's the tenant's money to be held in trust. And for some reason, that little detail is the number one thing that I've seen that gets really messed up, causes a lot of problems. And there's very specific rules when it comes to security deposit, and the 16-page lease that is most commonly used in residential applications details out what you can or can't do with that security deposit. So that's a big one. Plus the funds that get collected by the property manager and what actually gets dispersed to the owner. There's a big question there. But I think another reason why you may not see as many complaints as what may be reflective of what's actually happening is because that agent, the consumer goes to the agent, thinks the agent is the end all be all, doesn't realize there's a broker sponsoring that person that's actually responsible for them. So unless that consumer is educated on where the chain of command is per se, they think that ABC Property Management Company that's being run by an agent not doing it properly is the end all be all. And they may get a Better Business Bureau, bad filing or, review on Google or whatever the case may be, but it may not make it to Trex desk because that consumer doesn't realize where that line actually goes.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
One quick thing, I just want to make a note on here, just based on an observation on this chart, is that if you notice we had a drop in 2020 and in 2021, I think there's a direct connection to the pandemic and the drop in complaints. Mike, anything you'd like to say on that, as far as like moratoriums and things like that, as far as complaints from consumers on property management, possibly maybe a connection here?
Well, I'll try to be loud so I can be on record. 2020, we did have 2019, we had about 5,800 complaints. We had about 5,000 complaints in 2020. Obviously, like I said, complaints, overall openings significantly ticked up last year. But overall, broker sales kind of remain about the same past few years. Our big increase is applications, the factor history stuff. That actually takes up over 50% of, or more than that, of our openings.
But as far as property management goes, is what I mean, the breakdown in the property management sector, because of the moratoriums and things like that, do you think there's been a downtick?
The thing is, we see the complaints later on when the market's already reacted or something's already happened. That's why, we still see kind of high numbers in the 13 because it's taken people a few years to file a complaint or maybe realize this is where we can file a complaint or something like that, like they were saying.
You may not be able to hear me. I think we have a complaint, in my opinion, we have a complaint issue to begin with because people are scared to file a complaint or they don't know how to file a complaint or they don't know that option is out there. So I think through the outreach program, that is something that we really need to address because it is an issue. We don't know what the real problem is because people aren't filing. I've had people that I have no clue who they are call me on the phone to ask, what do I do about my agent? I just had another person yesterday, like, how do I file this complaint? What do I do? They don't even know how to download their information. So people have no clue what to do it. So to get that number of how many issues are there, who knows?
And I think to your point, I think that has had a substantial impact. I know from, the property management circles that I'm in, plus the investor network groups that I'm in, investors right now may not be filing complaints because they feel kind of helpless with this moratorium that's gone on because it doesn't matter what the tenants have done for the property. They just feel like, that CDC moratorium that got put on, everybody's kind of sitting in limbo. Of course, now it's starting to filter back through, but I think that has a direct impact on everything that's going on and possibly the lack of complaints that are there too.
All right, Mr. Baker, I still show your hand up. Ty, I've got your hand up. Do you not have something you want to add?
Yeah, if I might, I think I have a good sense that we're very interested in this issue, and to Bill's comments about the numbers that enforcement is seeing, And I believe this goes back to the complaints file that was just mentioned. I think that what enforcement is seeing is the tip of the iceberg. That is probably 10 times as much as what enforcement ends up seeing. But aside from that, when we looked at this on, when ESAC looked at this a few years ago, an extensive amount of time was spent. Actually over several meetings and a lot of work in putting something together. I'm glad Chance has asked Jennifer to send us that. I think this is an issue that's really important, but I would like for us to have that information. I don't want to take a chance of kicking an important issue down the road, but I think we need that information and see what ESAC has done. And that'll help us a lot as we move forward and make some recommendations. So I'd really like for us to agree that this is an important issue, but we need that additional information from ESAC to be able to decide what it is we want to try to move forward and do. I'd like to make that suggestion.
All right, thanks. Not to make you and get your workout in today. So Lee brought it up, Mike Mingdon brought it up in his email. Somebody else, I can't remember who it was, I think maybe Bob initially, he would think his first comments brought it up. I'm the broker and I don't know what's going on. How real is that? Like, what happens there? Could you walk us through, for the purpose of education, when a complaint comes in and an agent has done something wrong and the broker says, I didn't know anything about it. What happens there?
Well, I mean, like in all complaints, if it's against the sales agent directly, the sponsoring brokers joined in the complaint, it's investigated. Usually in property management, a lot of other related issues, we'll ask for their policies and procedures first of all, see like what that entails and how detailed it is. Yeah, I can say that, you know, we look at it from a fact, case by case basis. Yeah, if the sales agent was, you know, possibly really pulling the wool over the broker's eyes, and we see that the broker is, you know, trying their best to find out what's going on, then, you know, maybe the broker just gets an advisory letter, or, you know, maybe gets an inspection. You know, we also require to look at, you know, overall complete history of all the people that we get complaints. So, you know, if this is like the 7th complaint we've got against the broker, we're gonna have a lot less doubts in regards to their honesty to us, right? So that takes into a big factor. Also look at the harm of the consumer and just, you know, overall proactively what they're doing to overall supervisory. Yeah, I mean, the rules, the broker responsibility rule says they're responsible for the property management. I mean, specifically, they pointed at the commission when they drafted that rule, specifically, you know, pulled out property management outside of all the other disciplines that, you know, agents may handle. You know, they wanted to make a specific point. So, I mean, that's something that we look at intimately in each case.
Okay, thank you. Sucker, you had your hand up?
Yes, I did. Hi, everyone. So I'm a broker, and in my policies and procedure manual, it says no property management is not authorized. It's one of the unauthorized things, and it's spelled out in the policies and procedures manual. Now, if one of my agents is on the side doing their property management, and then someone calls the broker, me, and says, you know, Bill Roth is my property manager, and I don't know about that property management. As the broker, I end it right there. I tell them to stop doing it. If they move forward, then at that point, I'm supposed to probably just terminate them and tell them to go on their way, correct?
I would say yes.
Okay. All right.
That's really
Yeah. It's like, ding. Yeah. Okay. Perfect. Because it's specifically stated in my policies and procedures, no property management at all. Thank you.
Mr. Baker, I still show your hand up.
Sorry, I forgot to lower it.
That's okay. Just wanted to make sure you didn't want to throw anything else in there.
Thank you.
So as we look at this from what can this group do, you know, I look at this from kind of 2 points of view. Is number one, under 535, the big term is competency. And how do we ensure that brokers are themselves competent in property management if their agents are doing property management, right? But at the end of the day, I think that whatever comes of that is going to probably have to go through ESAC. But correct me if I'm wrong. Somebody on staff tell me I'm wrong.
Never. No, that's correct. And I think that's really what Jennifer was speaking to with that discussion originally being in ESAC a few years ago.
So even if we, let's say, I would definitely like to see what they, you know, you guys have put in a lot of work and it seems to be going on for a while, but at the minimum, in my opinion, if we already have a course for property management, if we decided to, hey, let's make that mandatory for the brokers, if they're going to do property management and have the agents that want to participate in property management take that course, is that something that can be decided? Does that have to do through ESAC? Like just to make something you already have mandatory?
Procedurally, how would that work?
Yeah, that's.
Because we can make all kinds of motions to send things places. It's never going to happen. We're just wasting time.
Honestly, procedurally, I'm not sure how that would work. There will be a lot of components to that. It is something, you know, that is certainly an option for this group to consider. I don't think that would need to go through ESAC. If you're, Vanessa, if you're talking about something that's already in existence, the recommendation from this committee.
I'm just not sure I understand what the recommendation is.
So the recommendation I'm thinking would be that if, on one hand, if, again, members of this group, correct me if I'm wrong, but on one hand, we would have a recommendation to the commission that if you are engaged in property management activities or supervise someone who is, you need to be competent in those activities, and to prove competency, you would need to take the property management class and or an industry association designation on property management, like the Texas Resident Property Manager course, the TAR offers, something like that.
So what I'm hearing you say is the recommendation would be that if any licensed builder is engaging in property management, they would need to either take the existing 30-hour property management course or perhaps some sort of designation that exists in the industry. Equivalent.
Yeah.
Can we count that as a motion?
No, you know, I think you can here because I have not looked into the applicable statutes rules for this. What I think you can do is give us that recommendation and or if you have another alternate path, I don't know that you do, you can give that to us. We can research it, look at it, bring back to you what that recommendation would look like. You can flesh it out in the next meeting and then that could be your formal recommendation. And if it ties to, you know, our recommendation is X, Y, and Z and we liked where ESAC was headed, and that I think you can make that recommendation to the commission and take that direction with ESAC, and, you know, so you can look at it that way. I think the best thing to do though is to direct staff to look into that recommendation, flesh it out, and bring it back to you.
Okay. Mr. Roth, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I sort of want, I think I sort of support Vanessa's comments is that not that we kick this can down the road, but I think I'm not prepared at this point to make any recommendations to anybody on this subject. This is a complicated issue and I think it's a serious issue and I'd like to have more information. I like the idea of seeing the information from the education group and the work that they've done in the past. I also am hesitant and reticent about suggesting that we make anything mandatory until we really understand what the real critical issue is. I think there's some good opportunities to maybe investigate enhancing our broker responsibility courses to allow for that, some property management information in there. I think there's opportunities for promoting designations that are not licensing or mandatory requirements, but promoting designations that might allow the public to identify people who have certain expertise in this area and show certain competence and qualification that might help encourage people to take a better position in their professionalism. I also am concerned that we're sort of getting into an area that is already pretty much handled by other areas. In other words, dealing with financial misappropriation and irresponsibility is really something that's a civil situation. I think is more a policing effort that I don't know that the real estate commission should be sort of in the middle of how people practice and do things properly or improperly within their industry. And I'm talking about legal or illegal, not competency or not competency. So anyway, again, it's a long comment, but I'm hesitant at this point to make any kind of serious recommendation without having a little bit more information. And Chance, you may want to, maybe we could have some kind of a poll between now and our next meeting to sort of be able to think about this, maybe give ourselves some chance to make some suggestions or craft some more detailed ideas of how we might get to the point we're getting at without making it a new law and a new regulation and something mandatory, but still accomplish our goal of making sure that people are doing the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Warren.
Just to that point, I think that part of what he's referring to in having consumers look and see like a designation or whatnot, that exists. That's already been there. It's not the impact I think that we wanted that to have. I think that it sounds really good as a possibility, and I think that was the intent of doing the designations originally. But I think we've shown that that actually isn't having the impact that we had want. Don't get me wrong, I didn't have the intention of coming in and thinking we get a motion passed and boom, we're going through. I sit on these committees, I know how this works.
Right.
Nothing ever happens in a day. The other thing I wanted to at least make a note of is that what I'm referring to and what's really brought up and what I really think would be risk for the consumer, and Bill brought this up a little bit earlier, I'm talking 1 to 4 family residential. So if we do something like this, which I think would be, again, not the end all be all, but I think a good step in the right direction, designation for the brokerage and whatnot, we could use existing classes. There are plenty of existing classes out there on property management that would cover what we're talking about. So I don't think we would require new education there. It's just a matter of requiring certain education. But I think if we do this, we specify this to a 1 to 4 family residential. I don't think the risk to consumers is really on above that in the 5 or more in the commercial area. And I don't really want to put undue burden on commercial brokers and people who just do work commercially to have to go through this process to do commercial, because that's not really where the risk to consumers is. So I don't know what that would look like, but the intent here would be more for the 1 to 4 family than the commercial side.
So Lee, just to clarify, competency is what you're concerned with?
Competency and accountability.
Accountability, education, and I guess really the last piece would be identification, because you want to identify who's actually supposed to be responsible for those activities. I think it makes perfect sense to me.
Thank you, guys. Bill, I'm still showing your hand up. Is it? You still?
I'm sorry, I forgot to lower my hand. Thank you.
Okay, just wanted to make sure there wasn't any additional comment.
No, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close discussion on this, and I'm going to direct staff to as we talked before, provide us with the materials that ESAC had on this subject, and then do a little bit of research into the right way to present this to the commission as a whole.
Yeah, absolutely.
And we'll bring that up in the January meeting. So.
An IT.
Okay. We are going to take an IT break. So it is 2 minutes after 11. How much of an IT break do we need?
IT.
It'll fix it in 10 minutes.
All right, we are back in order. Tech break. So I felt like that discussion went really well. We've got good direction on it. So I appreciate everybody's input and Lee driving in to talk a little bit more about it. And so we'll move on to Vanessa's update on outreach. Agenda item number 4.
Forgot I had an item. Okay, hello, everybody. I just wanted to give you, this will be very quick, very short agenda item. I wanted to let you know that the commission met in workshop at the in August and had a very long discussion on potential outreach options for the commission itself. And I went ahead and presented a lot of the recommendations that came out of this meeting last time from your open discussion on, you know, what is it you'd like to see more of? Video, I think, was the overwhelming winner. Just the different ideas that you all had presented. So I went ahead and presented those to the group, which actually ended up acting as a little bit of a launch pad for a much bigger discussion on commission initiatives for the upcoming year, and ways in which the commission can get some more outreach in terms of consumer protection, what's working, what's not working. You know, again, I'm going to go with the video example because I think it's the one that everyone speaks to. And we do have a new video out there starring me. So that direction is going, and there will be follow-up discussion about that at the next commission workshop. And I think that you will see a lot of those ideas that you all talked about starting to come to fruition. And do not be surprised if you are tagged at some point by one of us to do a video, because I cannot do all of the videos. But if you have interest in doing anything like that, please feel free to reach out to me directly. And just want to let you guys know that conversation really started and it's rolling, and that your ideas were heard and listened to.
Excellent. Thank you. Thank you. All right, we're going to move to item number 5, which is discussion of possible action regarding 531.2, information about brokerage services notice. So we have Commissioner Lerner here with us today. So there was comment previously submitted by her to include a file a complaint with Trek language into the information about brokerage services. And so you want to comment on that?
That was actually brought up to me by a builder who sees that there are issues out there as well. And he said that would be a great place, as we discussed a little bit earlier. People don't know that there's an option for a complaint, and they don't know where to file a complaint. So just wherever you could put it out there is probably better. It doesn't cost anything to add it on there.
Okay. That's the thought. Any comments on that from anybody in the group? Or?
I guess I'll speak up.
Thanks for always saving me from the awkward silence.
I'll just go ahead and do it. My only concern with this is that we also don't want to increase frivolous complaints. That would be the only negative caveat to it. However, I think the commission does an excellent job on sifting through complaints that are really not valid, I guess, or not pursuable would be the word, I guess.
No, they have no merit.
No merit. I like that one. Chances are good.
All right. Any other comment? Is this something that this group would like to see happen? Is this something there's nothing about? Soccer is shaking her head back and forth vigorously. Mr. Roth?
Yeah, I sort of echoing Ty's comments. I don't know that I don't think this is something that's appropriate for the information brokerage services document, and And if there's a need to provide consumer awareness in a different venue, I think that's the right place. But I think in this particular situation, I don't know the law in it. I just don't know the answer. But I thought that this information brokerage services was also to sort of establish minimum requirements, but it's also to sort of satisfy a statutory requirement of identifying who you represent, or that the parties can be represented, as opposed to a broad sort of identification that we're regulated by TREC. And so I don't know that if we want to pursue a consumer awareness program, I don't know that this particular document is the right place to instigate it.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Baker?
Okay, I need some clarification, and maybe Ms. Lerner can help me. Are we looking at adding a change to the IBS form? Dealing with some complaints? I'm not sure I understand where you're going.
Not a change, just an additional paragraph. If you would like to file a complaint, or if you have a complaint, you can file it with TREC at this address or this website.
Okay, yeah, I agree with Bill. I don't think this is the appropriate document. However, one of the things that I think should be considered, I don't know that we're the group to do it. One of the confusions I come across a lot is that agents and consumers think this form tells them who they represent. And of course it doesn't. It's just information. And I would love to see something up here. The following information, I thought, it does not tell the consumer who the agent represents, because it doesn't. Yet I hear that a lot. And they say, oh yeah, the form, the other crazy thing I get, oh yeah, and also it tells me that this gives me written consent for an intimate relationship, which it does not. So I don't know whether a clarification statement of this is information only and does not tell the consumer who the agent represents, something of that nature would be helpful, because I come across that a lot. Just my thought.
It does say on the top of the page.
It
It's
says,
information, doesn't it? Pretty clear.
yeah, it says, yeah, but it says in there, if you read it, I think that's in bold, it says, in order to have someone represent you, you must enter into a written agreement between you and the agent, i.e. a listing agreement or a buyer's representation agreement. If I'm not mistaken, that's what
I
that
agree.
form says.
You're right.
Yeah.
It's good information. And I love your optimism to actually read that. I think that's great. I love the thought.
Just read the document, it's there.
Sagar, did you have additional comment?
No.
outside of vigorous head shaking?
No.
Yeah, I tend to agree that this document is not the right place for that, because it's not the purpose. But I mean, we have a couple of attorneys in the room that might give us some direction. I mean, to me, statutorily, it's not the place.
So this document, we did some research on this. So this document lives with this group. If it's going to be in an advisory committee, it's not a broker lawyer document. If the interest is, and what sounds like what Commissioner Lerner is speaking to, and I think this is something that for her is really important, is this idea of, can we get this message of file a complaint out everywhere? And since the IABS goes to, I'm going to say this generically, everyone, is this a good spot for it? And if so, you all could vote to make that recommendation to the full commission. Or if not, then it seems like your other discussion point on this could be, well, one, it sounds a little bit like maybe some outreach education on what is the IABS and what does that mean to the consumer, and what does it do? And two, I think we can, I don't even know that this needs to be a recommendation from this group because I think it already exists, is file a complaint with Trek. That seems to be the driving home beat that, and that conversation can be had via outreach, it can be had at the commission level, et cetera. So really the decision point here was to look at whether this group wanted to make that recommendation to put the, you know, if you want to file a complaint, here's where you do that. And if you don't, I think you can speak to what you were just speaking to, which is maybe there's some education here.
Right, is there anybody who wants to speak in favor of that idea of putting this on the IBS? Okay, then we will move forward on our agenda.
Yeah, and we'll take the note of, you know, maybe this is the topic for our next viral video.
Next viral video starring
That's right.
Commissioner Leslie Leonard. All right, we're gonna go to item number 6 on the agenda, which is calculation of active experience points under which is our education and experience requirement for a broker's license, and then the simplification of supplement A and corresponding changes to supplement B. I think we were talking about this before the meeting, that it may be easier for Denise to actually start with B and then we'll move to A. So let's take a look at the supplements before we get into the rule.
Sample for licensing for the record. Yeah, it's easier to kind of make the changes to the form and then have the rule kind of mimic those. At least. I do want to point out, I'm not sure what pages they are in the materials. Actually, yeah, page 9 of your meeting materials show the branding form with the changes that you guys all mentioned in the last corporate responsibility working group meeting that were incorporated. So the order in your materials are the form as it was proposed at the last meeting, the new form with the changes incorporated from the last meeting, and then behind that is the current form as it exists today. So to simplify this, and maybe kind of summarize what we've done or what you've done and what we're capturing in this new form is a little bit of reordering, cleaning up of the instructions. We've also removed the listing agreements and buyer's representation agreements as a method for earning points. And just as a note on the new scale, which is dropping a 0 from the total point, those would have been worth 1 point each. So we're not really removing a large point here. You're increasing the point value and you're increasing the point value of and removing the maximum points allowed to be earned for team management. So this allows an applicant to earn all of their experience points by managing a team. And this also, the changes that you made at the last meeting, increase the point value of a closed sale on residential unimproved property from 5 points to 30 points. And this happens in improved property. We relocated the transaction identification list back to the center of the form and fleshed out the additional fields that you want captured. So the MLS number if applicable and the role in the transaction. Are there any questions about this draft version of the form? Or anything that we overlooked or anything else that might need to be added?
Can't see it. Can we see the revised?
Yeah.
But this is the, that was from, this is from.
Should have all been in the materials of the.
But there's
Starting on page 9.
Okay, sorry, got it.
Yeah, sorry, at the top for anybody else.
I printed that, so I couldn't.
I also printed it. I'm hopeful. At the top, it'll say agenda item 6B new form, and that's the one that's incorporated the changes from the last meeting. And I do want to point out there is one edit that we do need to make to the rule to match the form. We've already notated that and get that over to Amber so before it gets into the next meeting materials. That'll be corrected.
All right, I've got hands up from Mr. Baker and Mr. Roth.
Okay, so please help me here. I'm not clear on which forms are showing the proposed changes. What pages am I looking at here? Is it 9?
Page 9 of the meeting materials, and at the top of the form in red, it says agenda item 6B, new form.
Oh, okay. And so that's the new, so the next several deals with that. Okay. Thank you. That's helpful. Thank you.
Mr. Roth?
I didn't print this out on my color printer, so I didn't have the big red. So.
Gotcha.
Thanks.
I was trying to sort of go back to the paperwork that we did the last meeting. For some reason, and again, we may have already, maybe we approved it or changed it. I thought that we were deleting the second sentence in the first paragraph of the saying that for calculation purposes, because it was a little bit confusing. That second sentence. Or the third sentence, for calculation purposes. Was that clear to everybody what that meant?
Which number?
It's
In the supplemental A, the first paragraph there, the third sentence where it starts for calculation purposes.
The date the application was filed, it should be listed in the reverse chronological order beginning with the year the application is filed.
Again, I was just a little bit confused, but that doesn't, I'm confused about a lot of things, but I was just wondering if everybody was clear on what that really means.
I think it makes sense to me, but I don't remember us wanting to delete it, but I could be wrong. I don't remember.
I think it needs to be there.
So could you explain it to me?
Yeah, it means that, this is soccer. It means that beginning with the year that the application is filed, you go backwards 5 years.
So if I applied for this today,
Mm-hmm.
I would include 2021 in my calculations as one of my 5 years. That's why.
You would,
Okay.
That's
Yeah.
correct.
All right. Ready for Denise to be able to put it like.
It's just if you guys don't know what you're doing.
Anyone else with comment on this document as it stands?
Commissioner just brought up on the 6th, it says 5-1, but you don't have 5-1 somewhere.
We do recash it. We probably need to change.
Right, can you speak up a little
What
bit?
if we just think closing statement or settlement statement?
Yeah, I think under item number 6, we need to replace HUD-1s with closing statement or settlement statement, something along those lines. We still will get a HUD for the cash sale from time to time, but we're gonna get a closing disclosure for a finance.
yeah, you get a HUD-1 for a cash deal, it's still a HUD-1, so maybe a HUD-1, comma, closing disclosures or whatever.
Yeah.
How about if, this is just a grammatical thing and we can say no? See where it says you must complete the entire experience report to report? You must complete the entire experience report to, what was the word I just thought of? To illustrate or do something other than report and report.
Demonstrate.
To document or demonstrate.
Document would be good.
Document your
Yeah.
qualifying experience. I think
Yeah,
that's-
document would be
do that again.
I could get some
Either
clarification.
that or capitalize the expansion.
So that's on number 7.
But just to go back to number 6, to get clarification on that.
I'm gonna replace it with settlement statement.
settlement statement.
So replace that.
That would cover everything.
Just a general statement.
The settlement statement would include a HUD 1 or a closing disclosure.
So we can make that change to line 6, and on number 7, what would we change that to? You must complete the entire experience report to document.
To document.
Experience. Great.
Breakdown.
Good. Hang on. On page 3 of the document, page 11 of our meeting materials, under certification, 1 again, we're going to replace that with settlement statement. Go right ahead.
Okay, and I know some of you are still looking through that. I will just note, I am not sure yet, but there is the possibility that with this rule change, it may implicate us working with the Governor's Office of Regulatory Compliance, and this is a new group. We've worked with them on inspector education rules, and then with one other rule. But it's a group from the Governor's Office that will, as the rule is in its proposal state, we'll send it to them. They'll take a look at it and see if there's any issues with it as it pertains to this concept of barrier to entry. You know, is it making something harder for the person to obtain, the license holder to obtain that broker status? Here it's, and that's okay, it can, right? They do, they have an entire process where they balance it, they look at what like the overall impact would be. Is it a lot of people, is it few people? Here, in some ways, it's actually, like on some of it is making it easier, and on some of it is raising the points. So this is all just to say, if that process is initiated, that we, staff, will work with them, and then what we bring back to you during the comment period, or after the comment period is closed at your next meeting, we'll discuss any recommended changes they have, what they, you know, we'll include correspondence, we'll let you know where we are. Could that prolong the process? Yes. Could it not? Yes. It's really just going to depend. We do have to have their sign off before we can go for adoption, but it's actually like a very well streamlined process. We know, you know, what we're doing with them, and they're very helpful. I just want to speak to that because it's something new, and you may end up seeing some stuff with regard to that.
So I know we talked about that in our very first meeting of this group, but I feel like what we've come up with here, and you all do this for a living. I feel like what we've come up with here is pretty easily defensible. Like we've made we've leveled the playing field educationally while making somebody prove their experience a little bit more. Certainly not in an egregious way, I don't think, or a burdensome way to getting up to license. From an experience standpoint, which is really the truth, to me, the true telling the story of are they equipped to be a broker instead of tech? But also, tell me if we're setting ourselves up for failure.
No, and I don't mean to indicate that process is even remotely a path towards failure. It's not. It's just the process, and it's truly just another level of oversight to make sure that, you know, our rulemaking process is fair and we're doing what we need to do. And I don't even know that this will be implicated. I just don't want to come back in.
Be surprised.
I don't know when our next meeting is, but January, and spring this on you. And I think here you're right. I think there was some balancing, and if anything, you know, it's certainly cleaner form and the points make more sense. So we'll just see what happens. I just wanted to let you guys know.
Excellent, thank you. Bob, I've got your hand up.
Yeah, I've got two things. One is a small little curiosity thing. If someone has the affidavit in lieu of documentation, does Trek look at that differently than the documentation? Is this kind of an uphill climb? And they say, whoa, no documentation, nothing signed off by your broker, who, by the way, may have passed away, whatever. But does Trek accept this affidavit in lieu of documentation and on its face and move forward as if everything's okay?
Yes, Bob, to answer your question, we accept that because there are situations like what you just described.
Sure. Okay.
The broker passed away or moved to, another location, they can no longer get a hold of them. That affidavit spells out, how many signatures they need and what kind of information that they need to show, why they don't have that documentation, the attempts were made to obtain it. So yeah, we do accept that. We don't get a lot of them, but no, it doesn't present any kind of burden other than it is additional paperwork that the applicant needs to submit.
Perfect. Thank you, Denise. Okay, so other question, and I hesitate to ask this because I try not to prove up how dumb I am and how much I don't pay attention. But could you, in 10 words or less, give me a quick summary of our new proposal for education and experience as it changed from what we've had before? Does anybody just right off the top of your head say, okay, Bob, it's not 900 hours anymore, it's this number of hours and it's this level of experience? Because I thought I remember experience is more important than education and we kind of balance those out. But I'm sorry, but I just don't have a good sense of where we ended up.
Yeah, I mean, essentially we've leveled the playing field for people with and without college degrees on the education standpoint, to where everybody's going to fall into the same number of required hours unless they have a college degree specific to real estate, and then we've essentially doubled the experience.
So Tim, give me a number. What are our numbers that we're proposing?
Isn't it 660 is the number of class hours, or am I mistaken?
Right.
We moved from 900 on education to 660?
630.
630, okay.
And for experience, we're at that 360? Is that right? Is that still where we are?
So I think I want to make sure I understand what we're talking about. I'll interject with that, which is that, previously this group worked on an overall recommendation that's going to require where you balanced out the education experience. You toggled it to where you thought it was good for formal recommendation. And those changes can't actually be made at this time because it requires a legislative change. Last legislative session was a little bit different with COVID, et cetera. So this project, what you're looking at now, is separate from that recommendation. It initially started as a discussion of, gosh, how can we make this form easier to understand? I think it was Commissioner Lerner had brought it forward when she was chair in terms of the truly just like the experience points. And, I think they were in the thousands, and can that be simplified to something that, people can see and that also maybe doesn't look as daunting. Things like that. And so that's where this conversation comes from that. So it's separate. Will it, should your recommendations or something similar move forward legislatively, it would require some further adjustment of this. But I think here what you're really looking at is the simplification of this form, and you tinkered a little bit with some of the point values.
Okay, that helps. So when I have one of my agents say, Bob, what does it take to be a broker? I want to be a broker now. We're operating under the current rules. I say, well, 900 classroom hours and 5 years, and plus you must be a really nice person. I believe we have that nice person requirement here somewhere. So right now it's 900 classroom hours. They get credit for some college and all those kinds of things, but that's the requirement right now, including a 30-hour brokerage course. And so we're looking, one, to do a great job of cleaning up the forms, but we're also going to drop that 900 hours to some much lower number, 630, and then we're balancing out the experience requirement. Is that eventually, and I understand it's going to go to the legislature in a couple of years, and all that, but right now, our function, what we're looking at is not so much those total numbers, but cleaning up the form. But that we eventually, before the legislature comes up, we'll say, and here's what we want to do. Here's the new rule. We want it to not be 900 hours. We want it to be 630 hours, and we want it to be this experience. Is that where we're going with this?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, because I get, one of the problems with being on these groups is that people, oh, Bob, you're doing this Trek stuff now, so you know this stuff. So what's the answer? And I go, well, I don't know. You're supposed to know. So I'm just trying to make sure ahead of time I've got some answers so I don't look totally stupid. So thank you very much. That was perfect.
Yes, sir. Soccer?
No need, sorry.
All right, Mr. Roth?
Hi, I also was sort of echoing Bob. I'm just the length of time we've been talking about this stuff. I can't remember all the things that we did. I guess we got the COVID fog. So anyway, what I was asking, did we ever talk about that courses that were for that 630 hours? Did we ever talk about allowing courses that are from designation courses or TREC approved courses other than just university courses that could be do we give people credit for trying to get their designation certifications, CCIM or CPM, or getting CSMs, different property management stuff? Is that considered, or any TREC related course that you're entitled, that has that you get hours for? Do folks get credit for that against that 630 hours? And if they
Yes,
don't, should we incorporate that into our discussion?
They do.
Why don't we let the head of
He's
that
talking
department?
about like a GRI or CRS or
Right.
CCIM. Those are TREC approved hours, and so those hours are recorded on your TREC education transcript. And so your TREC education transcript has any TREC approved hours that you take, whether it's Legal One, CCIM, all of those, and they all culminate to whatever the 630 or 900 or whatever we are taking. Their hours are in there. Like SRES.
Hold on just a second, guys. Hold on just a second.
Hi there, I just wanted to comment that, yes, Tucker's right. The majority of those courses have already been submitted to us and approved through the traditional TREC approval process. There may be some instances where some professional designations have not been submitted to us, so I cannot offer you a blanket guarantee that professional designations will count. But historically and traditionally, most of those are acceptable for student credit.
I think we just recently got the numbers on that, right? It's pretty high.
We did, yeah.
And when you sign up at most schools to take something like that, they're going to tell you whether or not it's a CE class.
They should, yeah. And part of our advertising requires you to display, that it is approved for how many hours and the course approval number.
Well, and again, I'm sorry, but I'm still not 100% clear. Because in the requirement, the regulation requirement, we're going to go to the detail in 535. If you're trying to get a broker's license, it doesn't say that it's specific, doesn't specifically say that it just says an accredited college or university. And so my question is, and I don't know that the general population of folks looking to get their education requirements satisfied understand that designation courses are applicable. And anecdotally, I've heard from several people who've asked me, I haven't gotten college credits, but I've been going to all these designation courses. Aren't I entitled to get some credit for that? And so if you're telling me that is in fact something that is allowed and is getting credited for, I think we need to either, number one, we need to change the language in the regulation, but more importantly, I think we need to get the word out to folks that, especially folks that want to be brokers that are sort of agonizing over the college credit and the college requirement, especially since we still have the 900 instead of the 630. I think we need to get that word out that you all are giving them credit for designation courses towards their broker's license.
I'm an instructor, and I think Chance is an instructor as well. And every single class that every GRI, every SRES, PSA, all of these different designations that we teach, including the legal one and all of that, all of those courses that are approved by TREC Education have a corresponding number of hours that go along with it. And when we teach these classes, and the people who are trying to get their broker's license are going towards or working towards getting their designations, we do tell them, and they are aware from the local association, that they're gonna get CE credit and how many hours they get for that. So they already know when they take the class that, and they'll even ask the question, is it going to show up automatically? Yes, it shows up automatically on your TREC education record, because the association, whether it be local or state, reports it directly to TREC. So if they're trying to get their broker's license, they already know that they're acute. It's just my experience that they know that they're getting points for it.
Does that include the CCIM, some of the designation courses?
Yes.
It also includes CCIM and IRM and that kind of stuff.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Let me just read real quick. If you look at the page 4 of 17 of your meeting material, which is agenda item 6A, the actual 535.56 rules, it says commission approved continuing education courses.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, beautiful. Okay.
Education course, it's there. It's in the rule.
Okay, that's the clarification. That's exactly what I needed, because and listen, I'm happy to get the word out and pass it on to the folks that are calling me. That's great. Thank you.
Okay, so other than the grammatical changes made to the new form, is there any other comment on that?
Are we gonna discuss the points for the commercial based on the gentleman's letter? And I got pushed out to this meeting last month. Charles, was you there? Yeah, it's on.
He's talking about the amount of transactions.
Right. Charles McClure. Hold on, I'm gonna read you this again. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, he's saying 500, but we moved it to 50, which is what they had before. So I think he was probably just looking at the new, but now we changed it, so it's back to what he's claiming it should be.
That's what I was too.
Oh, we just said it was gonna be addressed.
Yeah, you're right, there's a discussion point on it.
Yeah,
You think it's covered?
I think we covered it, don't y'all?
I do.
Okay.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Help me with this. And you know, I saw the McClure letter. I'm not sure if someone is totally commercial and that's all they do. And if we're at the 360 point requirement, are we saying that regardless of the size transaction, whatever it is, they get 50 points?
The way it is.
Is that where we are?
Yes.
Yes.
So they've done 25 million in business over the last however many years. And it was 2 transactions, so they don't qualify to be a broker.
Yeah, the price of the transaction should not determine whether or not a person is capable of being a broker. It's the number of transactions and the number of clients served. So I mean, and they already get to 20 points more than residential. They almost get twice as much as residential.
I don't think it's the price of the sale. I think it's the type of sale. I don't think you can equate a $200 million office building with somebody doing 10 houses or anything of that nature. I think a type of transaction has to be taken into account. And I think we've got to separate the commercial broker from the residential broker. From that standpoint, I don't think the same requirements of the number of transactions you have to do as a residential agent to qualify to be broker. I don't think that should be anywhere near the same type of requirement if you're a commercial agent and you're doing transactions. I don't think it's a dollar amount. I think it's a type of transaction, and I think certain types of transactions cause it to be a different animal. Now, I've got, Bill's commercial, but I've got some commercial broker friends who are, they mostly, in fact, that's all they do is leasing. And they do a lot of those, but they don't do big numbers. So they do a lot. So they wouldn't have any problem qualifying if they weren't already brokers. But an agent who works for a large brokerage firm, and McClure in his letter points out some of those, because of the type of transaction, they would never qualify to be a broker. Yet I think that their experience level in doing the transaction they're doing and what they're doing in the business would be equivalent, in my opinion, to what many residential agents do when they do 5, 10, 20, 30 transactions, as it were. I think some way, shape, or form, we need to consider the animal, the different type of transaction, the different category of commercial versus residential. It's 2 different animals. I don't think it has anything to do with the dollar amount. I think it has to do with what's being done as you work through both in a lease situation. Lease is a little bit less of a challenge, but certainly in the brokerage end and the sales end. That's just my opinion, and I'm certainly going to go with whatever the group thinks, but I don't think that's fair to the commercial agent who eventually wants to obtain a broker's license. They'll never match this requirement. I mean, never.
Yes, they will. They are. I'm sorry, because they already get 20 points more than the residential agent. The residential agent who does the same number of transactions as a commercial agent is getting 20 points less per transaction. The commercial broker is already given a leg up on the residential agent. So 50 points for commercial and 30 points for a sale on residential. So they are already given almost 1.5 times what the residential agent is given. They've already been given more points. And so they get to 360 faster.
Soccer, I'd like to second what you're saying as well. And just based on the personal experience in my office, I have a full-blown commercial agent that only does commercial, and he's on transaction number 8 for the year. I think it really depends on where you are and the situation that you're in, but that depends on everyone's situation, including on residential. Some people do a ton of transactions a year, some people do a handful. We can't change that, and we can't cater to the weakest link.
Well, what about what Mr. McClure is saying on this letter with the larger commercial firms? And I know nothing about commercial, but he's stating that we have one large deal, you split it, so they get percentage of the points?
We'll say that it's just like any transaction that, if you're on a team and if you're running everything through a team, maybe they should start a team and run those transactions to themselves if they want to become a broker. The other thing, that is a very generalized statement. there's no proof behind it, and there is only, it's just a statement. It doesn't mean we should change the whole can of wax because of one statement. I'm just,
agree.
We're talking 7 transactions over a 5-year period to qualify.
Yeah, that's, I mean, 7 transactions for a commercial broker over 5 years. I mean, okay, it's, and maybe not all of them are gonna be the $250 million office building in downtown Dallas. But, you know, some of them will be maybe 50 million, maybe they're apartment complexes or whatever, but I don't think that it's too much to ask a commercial broker to have 7 to 8 transactions in 5 years. I think that's minimal.
and I don't think commission or anything else, dollar amount really has anything to do with it, period.
Neither do I.
I agree.
All right, Mr. Roth, I'm a hand up for you.
Sorry, I just failed to lower my hand. I'm sorry, I didn't have a comment.
All right. So any other discussion on changing this form other than the grammatical changes we made earlier?
I have one question about the form on that same line, where we're talking about the examples of documentation to support experience. Do we want to remove listing agreements? It's listed there and in the certification statement, just so that we remove them. And, okay, I just wanted to confirm that.
Yes.
Really be good.
All right.
I'm sorry, did you say you wanted to remove listing agreements from that documentation to support the claim?
Correct. Since we took that off of A, you get points for it.
Well,
So
but
points for listing agreements.
But I guess isn't, and again, I'm just asking the question in item 6, it's really that list of stuff there is not getting points for. It's basically identifying transactions and it's identifying activity levels. It's not, so I think that, you know, if people are trying to get information to track to prove that they were involved in a transaction, I think a listing agreement would be a document that would be part of that proof and verification of the transaction that is going on. So I don't know that it should be deleted because I think 6 doesn't have anything to do with the point, with the you know, the activity that you're getting the point from. It's just a proof of the transaction.
But executed contract kind of suffices for that, so it's kind of like a double.
Well, there may not be one, or there may be, you know, in other words, the closing statement too. Why do you want a closing statement? I'm just saying all of those things, I think, go to verifying and verification of the requested transaction, you know, experience points. Anyway, I just think the more things you allow people to prove up their claim, I think the better it is. And TREC is Trex, they're going to determine whether it's valid documentation or not.
Denise, your thoughts?
We don't currently audit those experience documents that come in. These are examples of documents that we would want an applicant to have on file in case it was ever called into question. So Mike, I think would be better equipped to explain what they might look for if you're trying to
Actually open a complaint for that?
or, you know, to demonstrate the experience that someone claimed.
They have to hold on the documentation for 4 years.
Statement and on that.
If it's just going through the audit,
Yeah.
I think that's it would be.
Let's see what Mike is part of it.
Because on the listing agreement on that supplement before we took it off the license.
Yeah.
I can't think of an example of this type, but you know, for people that may lie on their application in general, we're gonna ask for proof.
Right.
To, you know, negate that misrepresentation they had on their application. This would probably be the same situation.
You have the authority to ask for whatever the heck you want to, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
As part of an investigation, if there's, if we have jurisdiction, yes.
so since I would say listing agreements is no longer tied to points on this document, there's probably not a reason to have to provide it as part of this document.
Correct. Even if
Yes.
it's for us, that can always be asked for. under
Yeah, you
consent.
can always, et cetera, yeah, exactly, it can fall under et cetera. So I would say so. All right, on that note, do we want to make a motion to accept this document with its grammatical changes?
So moved.
Motion is made by Soccer, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Accepting this document with the grammatical changes made in this meeting? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion to accept this document with grammatical changes made during this meeting, say aye.
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 Aye. Same sign. Motion passes. Whew. I feel like that's a year's worth of work right there, you know? Good job, everybody. All right, do we want to talk about the rule for education experience, the changes made here?
So those changes, and you can, of course, discuss and look at it, they correspond with the changes that you made to the forms.
Do we need to do anything as far as acceptance to move this down the road?
Yes, because that's
Okay.
actually what's gonna move to the commission.
All right, so, page,
Amber's waiting on.
Bill opposed to that, I was recording the minutes.
oh, Bill, were you opposed to that motion? I think the audio came through a little late. Just want to make sure that your vote was on the record as either for or against.
I'm sorry, something jumped up on my screen all of a sudden, so I missed for a second there. Could you repeat what the issue was, what the motion was?
We were not sure if you were voting for or against the motion.
Which motion are you talking about?
The motion that just passed.
Oh,
On the
Acceptance of the form.
the form, I was in favor of it, a favor of passing the form, yeah.
Thank you, sir. If there was a little bit of delay in the microphone, so just wanted to make sure that we had that right.
Thank you.
I think Pam might accidentally be sharing her screen.
Pam, you might accidentally be sharing your screen. Which, I mean, if you've got good stuff. Okay, so next up would be the actual rule change. So this is page 4, 5, and 6 of your materials. And these are the changes corresponding to the form, so you can see that they're the same, essentially.
That changed.
Is there, Vanessa, is there something you need to add?
He just asked me this question. Yes, okay. So in the rule is presented in your materials under C. So page 2 under C, credit for experience, if you look at 1D, we need to make the edit that it's 30 points per transaction,
Okay,
which corresponds with what you've done. We will make that change.
okay.
So it'll be this rule with that change.
And then didn't you mention there was another typo?
I think that was the change.
That was the typo. So we have that one change where page 2, under 1D, it would be 30 points, not 5.
Yeah.
Mhm. Otherwise, Chair would entertain a motion to accept this document with that change.
So moved.
Should we have a second?
I'll second.
And a second to adopt the rule change to reflect the form already accepted with one change to section.
I'm sorry, this is Bill. Are we discussing the whole document or just that one change?
We are discussing the whole document.
Okay, I have some
Yeah,
other things that need to be changed.
Okay?
What?
Okay.
We're open for discussion.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hijack the conversation, but I just want to make sure that we didn't miss this. I
No,
think
no, no,
in,
yeah.
I think on page 2, section 1C, and also in section 2C, and in section 3C, where you're talking about rental, property management rent collection, I don't think that that's the correct, that's not what we're giving points for, is just for property management rent collection. And so I think it just needs to be property management. It shouldn't designate rent collection.
Can you say again what section?
It's 1C, 2C, and 3C. You have it highlighted there, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Bill, I think that is because that is what the statute says. That property management is defined as control of the collection of rent, the control of rent.
I don't think that's correct. I mean, when I say I don't think it's correct, it just doesn't seem like that's what our intention is for experience, is that it's only on rent collection.
What else would it be? It's property
it's
management includes rent collection.
Property management is managing properties.
Correct.
It's
Which
not about if you
includes
collect rent or not. In other words, what I'm trying to do is, in the experience requirements, I think it needs to be broad that you're managing properties, whether you're picking up the rent check or not, if you're involved in tenant response, or I'm asking the question, isn't that the intention of getting property management experience? It's dealing with properties and tenants and fixing things and handling regulations. It's not just about rent collection.
Bill, so what if it said rental property management / rent collection?
Yes.
I think it should just say rental property management. That's all it should say. Because that's what it is. You're managing rental properties. So it has nothing to do about rent collection. It's rental property management. It's not personal property management. I'm just saying, I think the rent collection addition on that line is confusing, and I don't think it's correct.
No, I understand. We understand the point you're making. Hang on just one second.
Well, I want to just throw Abby into this conversation too.
Abby walked in the door at the wrong time.
Yeah.
I'll be back.
Thank you.
So hold on just one second. Consulting attorneys. We're billing you by the hour here, Bill.
But that's where we landed.
All right.
Abby knows her rent.
Abby Moore to the mic.
Hello.
Hi.
Abby Lee, Deputy General Counsel. So as I understand the question, it's why the term rent collection is added to that category of residential property management. So my suspicion would be because the Real Estate License Act, when it defines brokerage activity, the only thing related to property management in that section is the collection deposit of rent from a single family residence. And so just to say property management would might be confusing. So I would guess that the reason that term's out is just to specify and tie it back to the statute.
And that was the discussion initially.
Yeah, so that was kind of our assumption there. So Bill, does that answer your question? That's why, it's because that's what matches the statute.
I'm sorry, I may just have bad connection. I really didn't hear what the answer was.
So the answer is that the word rent collection is there because, like we said, the statute says control of rent. And so that part is tying back to what the statute says, which is really the only thing it says about property management.
Right.
Yeah, for track. I mean, I don't think you're wrong, Bill, in that the big picture sense of the word property management is larger than control of rent, but statutorily,
Right.
control of rent is what the statute says when it comes to property management.
What we have jurisdiction over.
It's what the commission has jurisdiction over.
Okay, I just want to make sure that people are clear what they're getting credit for and that they don't get sort of technically knocked out of doing stuff, of getting credit for stuff that, you know, on a technicality that they may not be, that particular person may not be going there to collect a rent check. They may be working as a property manager. And again, I just want to make it easy for people to comply and also get the credits for doing legitimate work.
But, and I would make the point, and I don't disagree with you. I would make the point that this is the way that it has been written. This is not a change that we're making. It's been written this way forever. And so, and I mean, somebody on staff told me I'm wrong, but I don't think we're missing out on other people getting credit for property management because of that verbiage.
I think we can just give credit for.
Right, our jurisdiction is limited.
Right.
We don't have jurisdiction over property management in general, you know, everything, repairs, all that stuff. We just have jurisdiction over the collection and acceptance.
And so that's what we can give the credit.
Right.
Okay.
And this is what's written on there.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, right, and that's not, right, that's not in the changes that you all are proposing. You know, this will open up, so.
Any other discussion? All right, seeing none, all in favor of accepting the changes on this document, say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. Motion passes. That's a year of work, guys. Starting with Commissioner Lerner, like, congratulations. It's exciting stuff. Let's get the hell out of here. All right, any other new business, anything else we want to bring up in this meeting? Otherwise,
I have one thing.
Oh, wait, take forever.
Go ahead.
You can't really bring up new business.
Future.
Oh, future business.
it's all right.
Speak up.
Yeah.
You got it down.
I kind of like want to get on my soapbox. But we've talked about this in the past also about some sort of oversight mentorship for new agents. I know we've discussed it, we've done surveys on it, but I would love to figure out something we can do. As Houston has called for many people, it's the wild, wild west out there. There's people getting licenses in a month. And right now we have, what is it, over 40% new license applications? More than we've had in the past, is that right? We've had a lot of license applications since COVID. And so there's a lot of new agents, a lot of people sitting at home. We've got to figure out how these people can have better oversight and better training. So I would love to do some sort of group or something to brainstorm of how can that look and what can we do?
We're gonna have it.
All right, we want to add that to our agenda for next time? We can add that to our agenda for next time, Commissioner. Holly Hightower, you have your hand up.
Can you hear me? Oops.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I wanted to mention the same thing. That was a concern that was was brought up in a Texas Realtor small group meeting yesterday that I was in. So the oversight is something that's on the radar. That mentorship.
So I would say let's collect our thoughts on that and submit them for our next meeting. And in the meantime, we'll look at what education is going to provide us on property management course and any other you feel comfortable making a recommendation to the commission on that subject. Our next meeting date is Wednesday, January 12th of 2022, not 2021, at 10 a.m. The expectation is that that meeting will be held in this room, everybody together. There will not be a Teams option. In case we get some, unless we get some new variant, please plan on being in Austin on Wednesday, the 12th of January, 2022. No further discussion? This meeting is adjourned. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you, as always.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good job.